Hotep, brothers and sisters. You're now at the funerary temple of Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra, Ramesu, or as we know as otherwise as Ramses II of the 19th dynasty. This is where our story has been most viciously persecuted. This is where our story has been most viciously persecuted by biblical accounts that has nothing to do with the historical documentation that our ancestors have carved here in stone. But it's from looking at the pylons that we're going to show in a few minutes that somebody came here and copied the concepts of Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra, and incorporated into an allegorical biblical story that have no historical accounts whatsoever. Now, before I get into it, I want to tell you a story about Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra, and his battle of Kadesh with the Hittites. And the story says that Ramses II, who wanted to complete the battle that his father, Seti I, didn't complete, and that is to defeat the Hittite forces in the north. And he took his armies, and they were Brigade of Amun-Ra, Ptah. He named them after the Netters. But somehow Ramses got way ahead of his forces, and he found himself surrounded by the Hittite forces. And he called on the god Amun. He said, I've given praise to thee. I have given homage to thee. I've always given libation to thee. Now I find my enemy all around me. Then the spirit of Amun came to Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra, or Ramses II. And through the spirit of Amun-Ra, he told Ramses to maneuver his forces, although the Hittites have outnumbered him, told him to maneuver his forces into an arrow, something like a chess game. Whoever takes over the first squares in the middle starts to control the game. So he got his forces to move in an arrow. And Ramses triumphantly got in his chariot and forced his forces right down the middle of the Hittite forces, causing them to scatter. And from that, he ran them into the Aratus River, where many of them were flooded out and drowned at this point. So Ramses saved himself from the Hittite forces, from the spirit of Amun. He didn't call on the Hittites' God. He called on the God of his ancestors. He called on the God of many thousands of years. And the spirit of Amun came to him and able for him to defeat the Hittite forces. But how has the story come to us? Because we have been victimized by saying that there was a story where Ramses, this African pharaoh who's been most persecuted in the biblical account, that he enslaved some people. And that Ramses, and also mostly through Cecil B. DeMille's movies, that's where most of us have become victimized into believing this story, that through the Exodus, the people left. And then God sent the people across the Red Sea. Moses took and raised his magic rod, and the Red Sea opened up. Is that right? And then these people came across the Red Sea, and then they closed the Red Sea and caused Ramses' forces to be flooded over. Is that right? Let me also show you on the reliefs here. Now this is Ramses. See his chariot right here? This is his chariot. This is the Battle of Kadesh now. Carved in stone over 3,000 years ago. Now look at Ramses running the Hittite forces into the Aratus River. Notice the chariot's upside down. Just like you would see it in Cecil B. DeMille's movie on the Exodus, or Moses, showing that the story is that Ramses' army is being flooded out. But here's the exact story showing the Hittite forces upside down. Some of the men are even floating on the water right here. See them? And the chariots, look at some of the chariots upside down. So somebody came here long ago and copied this story and turned it against African people and claimed it for themselves, because these temples were under the sand for hundreds of years. They were dug out during the rise of, as I said before, European Egyptology. Okay, Egyptology, and with the rise of Egyptology, this is what caused these temples to be dug out of the sand to make tourist dollars. These temples were not always open, they were under the sand. So now you can see clearly that we're coming back, not as tourists, but to reconstruct African people's story from the racist biblical accounts that we got that were racist rabbis sit down and write. How can someone give us a picture version or a Hollywood, Ashkenazi, European, Jewish version of the story that was literally plagiarized from here? We come here to relieve Kemet from religious persecution, as Dr. Ben would say. We come back to tell the truth. We come back to tell the true stories that are on these reliefs that many tourists who come through here, by the millions, none of these stories are told to them. And if these stories were told to them or revealed to them, they could not believe the other story that has been told because it was copied directly from here. No story nowhere where Mesu was flooded out by the Red Sea, and definitely there was no story of no Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner playing as Ramses and Charlton Heston playing as Moses. No Moses story documented nowhere in the Nile Valley. People came here like scavengers, brothers and sisters, and literally copied one account after another account and corrupted the story. So here's the brothers that many Jews shall say he enslaved the Jews, which no account whatsoever that he enslaved any Jews. And you see his nose has been hacked out too, as you see him with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. This is the brother who lived between 1298 to 1232 BC and the 19th dynastic period. So we're coming back to reconstruct and liberate Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepen Ra, Ra-Mesu, or as we know today as Ramses II, from religious persecution that does not have no type of historical account whatsoever. Story of supposedly Moses holding up the rod and flooding out Ramses' forces. No documentation at all. But there is a story that in the 4th dynasty that the Jetamunk held his golden rod because Khufu's wife dropped her gold charm down into the Nile. And she went crying to him that I dropped your gold charm down into the Nile. He said, no problem, I'll call one of the Jetamunk. Go read the literature of Kemet. And the Jetamunk came and took his golden rod and parted the waters and went and got the gold charm. That's the 4th dynasty, long before Charlton Heston did this, up in Universal Studios. You can go right up in Universal Studios and see how Charlton Heston went right up there and made the movie. They parted the water, a little tram goes down where they made the thing at. And this is the mess that we got up in Hollywood. I lived out in L.A. They try to take you right up there and show you where they made the little story at and the little tram where the thing goes at. Had no facts whatsoever. Nothing but Hollywood. Even the story, one account after another, brothers and sisters, where we see the angel of death. And Egypt came and took, and they had to spread blood on their house so the angel of death would not kill them. Is that right? This was during the Passover. But in fact, brothers and sisters, this was the ram during the constellation of Aries when the sun passes over the equator in that constellation. But yet, long before their story of the angel of death, we always had this concept of sacrificing the lamb or the ram as we spread the blood over our homes and many different African societies. This is long before the angel of death as we did it. Let's look and see that the whole concept of the ram was in fact Amun. The zoomorphic form was Amun, and this is the sun in the constellation of Amun. And it was Amun during the sun when it went through the constellation of Aries. It represented Amun that you see right here. Here's Aries and Amun. And the Passover was no people passing out of Egypt. This was in fact the sun passing over the equator. That was the Passover, and it was a cosmological event. These were astrotheology, meaning stories told in the stars. Had nothing to do with no Jonah and the whale. This was a story of a cosmological event. Jonah was supposed to be eaten by the whale. No, these were cosmological stories that people saw in the stars. So it had nothing to do with no passing out of Egypt, but they, in fact, the sun passing over the equator. One account after another, you know, they said, we can finally prove that this biblical account exists. They said, how can you tell? They said, well, we found Ra-Mesu's 50 sons, and we're going to prove that his first son died. Well, you know, they unearthed the 50 sons of Ra-Mesu, and they found that his first son lived a long life, and they covered back up, and we didn't hear nothing else about it. So all this stuff, the story of the Exodus may be unearthed, well, we haven't heard anything about since they opened up the 50 sons of Ra-Mesu's tomb, as we see right here. So they try to blame it on Ramses' 13th son, Merneptah. They said, well, he got a lot of salt in his body. Well, we always use natron to mummify the cot that they call the mummy today. The next question came, well, how is it that the Red Sea washed his body across the desert, then down into his tomb, his body flipped up and down into his sarcophagus and the lid shut? Any excuse is better than none, I suppose. All these stories, brothers and sisters, and even Moses supposedly, now El comes in a burning bush and said he does not want to be called El anymore. He wants to be called Yahweh. Now, if you said that God spoke to you in a burning bush, they'd call you an animal. They said that Africans were animals because we worship trees and nature. Is that right? But here you got an account of Moses talking to God in the burning bush. But other stories of the judgment scene on the papyrus here showing Oni being led by horse. We didn't worship the animals. The falcon represents the sun because it flew in the sky all day. Where as he comes and leads him into the spiritual realm, notice as he comes before the great god Asaru and the canopy, he bows down and his hair turns white. Do you know of another story that another man who went on top of a mountain and his hair turns white right here, Moses, where he meets God on top of Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb? They haven't made up their mind what mountain it was. And supposedly God is in a burning bush. A burning bush. Now, if you were talking to God in a burning bush, they would call you animal. And supposedly his hair turns white, copied it from the papyrus of Nefer, where Oni's hair turns white when he came before the god Asaru. Just like Moses' hair turns white, supposedly when he came before the god Jehovah. And now we're told that the tabernacles were stones that the Ten Commandments was written on in the Sinai. But the only stones you're going to find in the Sinai was put there by Amenemhet III of the 12th dynastic period. And here we see those stones, those tabernacle stones. It says, inscriptions of Amenemhet III and Wadi Makhar Sinai. Those are the only stones you're going to find in the Sinai, and this is the African right here to put them there. He's no mythological character. He's a real character. This is the African that they took out of the Cairo Museum. Erasing your story because they watch us like a microscope knowing you're getting closer and closer to your story. And keep in mind that Amenemhet got Amen at the beginning of his name because the god Amen is who we worshipped at that time, still a monotheistic concept of one God. Just like I said, at one point God is called El, another point God is called Elohim, another point God is called Yahweh. So, different names at different period of time. If that's not polytheism, don't come in Africa saying polytheism or the concept of many gods. But Amen, we still say Amen at the end of our prayers, a jet black God. This is the God that you got to put down into your genetic library, down in your collective subconscious. Amen, the hidden spirit that's in all of us. Amen, the hidden spirit that permeates throughout all the universe. But yet, you go to the temple of Karnak. Here you see on top